I had exactly 60 seconds to decide if I was going to serve the Wagyu beef or serve up a death sentence. The azure dragon hummed with the kind of silence only money could buy, crystal clinking against porcelain, murmured conversations in 3 languages, and the soft jazz that made $600 entrees taste like power. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city glittered like broken glass, but in here, everything was controlled.
Polished. Deadly.
My hand trembled as I gripped the receipt folded in my apron pocket, the pen marks bleeding through the paper like an accusation. Each step toward table 1 felt like walking a tightrope over an abyss. One wrong move, and I wouldn't just fall, I'd disappear. People like me always did in places like this. Minsik Park sat with his back to the wall, exactly as a man in his position should. Dark suit, darker eyes, the kind of face that photographers would call striking and survivors would call merciless. His tattooed hand rested casually on the table, fingers drumming a patient rhythm near his whiskey glass. He looked bored, untouchable, completely unaware that in less than a minute, the men at the bar, the ones who'd ordered Aperol spritzes they weren't drinking, were going to stand up and paint these white walls red. Next to him, Sora Lim played her role flawlessly. Designer dressed the color of fresh blood, diamond engagement ring catching the light every time she touched his arm, that practiced smile that said, "Aren't we perfect together?" She laughed at something he said, tilting her head just so, and for a moment I wondered if she'd practiced that laugh in the mirror. The same way she'd probably practiced saying, "Make it clean, no witnesses," without her voice shaking. Because 15 minutes ago, I'd been restocking hand towels in the restroom when I heard her voice cutting through the marble-tiled acoustics, rapid-fire Korean spilling from her phone call. She'd assumed she was alone. Assumed the black waitress, wiping down counters, was just part of the furniture, invisible, unhearing, irrelevant. She assumed wrong. He dies before the check comes. Make it clean.
No witnesses.
The words had been clinical, professional, but it was what she'd said next that made my blood freeze. And after? The park syndicate becomes ours. No more playing second to a man who still treats me like a prize. Now I stood 3 feet from their table, receipt burning a hole in my pocket, watching Minsik Park, gang lord, killer, someone's son, completely oblivious to the fact that the woman he was planning to marry had just sold him out for a throne she planned to steal. My reflection caught in the window behind them. Wide eyes, brown skin going ashen, the white collar of my uniform suddenly feeling like a noose. This wasn't my world. I was supposed to pour wine, smile politely, and cash my paycheck to keep my little brother's heart monitor beeping. I wasn't supposed to be the only thing standing between a man and a coup disguised as a bullet. But the shooters were checking their watches. The kitchen doors swung open behind me with their familiar whoosh, and I knew this was it. The moment that would either save him or bury us both. I pulled the receipt from my pocket, unfolded it with shaking fingers, and walked forward into the kind of trouble that doesn't let you walk back out. The note read, "She sold you out. Shooters at the bar." As I approached, Minsik's eyes lifted to meet mine. Sharp, assessing, the kind of gaze that saw everything and forgot nothing. For a heartbeat, we were frozen in the image that would haunt me forever. His suspicion, my terror, and Sora's perfect smile starting to crack at the edges as she sensed something shifting in the air between us. Something that smelled like the end of her carefully laid plans. I slid the receipt under his whiskey glass, my hand betraying me with its tremor, and waited for the world to explode. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now let's get started. Time fractured into snapshots, the kind your brain captures right before a car crash. Minsik's fingers, tattooed and scarred, wrapped around the receipt. His eyes dropped to read it, and I watched his expression shift like a landscape after an earthquake. The boredom vanished first, replaced by something cold and calculating.
His jaw tightened.
Those dark eyes flicked up to mine, pinning me in place with an intensity that made my lungs forget how to work.
He didn't speak. Didn't need to.
The question was written all over his face. Are you lying? Are you part of this? I shook my head, barely perceptible, and watched his gaze slide past me toward the bar.
Counting.
Calculating. Cataloging threats with the efficiency of a man who'd survived this long by never trusting anyone completely. Not even, I realized with a chill, the woman wearing his ring. Darling. Sora's voice cut through the moment, syrup sweet and laced with concern. Is something wrong with your drink? Minseek's hand shot out faster than thought, catching her wrist before she could pull away. Not rough, almost tender, actually, but his thumb pressed against her pulse point with clinical precision.
Testing.
Waiting to see if her heartbeat would betray what her smile insisted was innocent. Sora's eyes widened, confusion bleeding into something sharper. Minseek, you're hurting. Your heart's racing, he said softly, almost conversational, but I heard the blade hidden in velvet. Why is your heart racing, Sora? For just a second, her mask slipped, and I saw something feral flash across her face before the perfect fiancé smile returned. The color drained from her face, and that's when I knew. She knew that he knew. Time snapped back into motion like a rubber band, pulled too tight. The shooters at the bar stood in unison, their movements synchronized in a way that screamed professional. One knocked over his untouched spritz. Another's hand disappeared inside his jacket. The jazz music suddenly felt obscene, this cheerful soundtrack to murder. Everything happened at once. Minseek's other hand grabbed the edge of the table, flipping it forward in one violent motion. Plates, glasses, that beautiful wagyu, all of it crashed to the floor as the table became a shield. His arm hooked around my waist and yanked me down just as the first gunshot cracked through the air like thunder in a cathedral. I hit the ground hard, Minseek's body covering mine, the scent of his cologne mixing with gunpowder and my own terror sweat. Around us, the restaurant erupted into chaos, screaming, more gunshots, the distinctive pop-pop-pop of silenced weapons mixing with the louder bark of whatever Minseek had just pulled from his shoulder holster. Stay down, he growled against my ear, and then he was moving, returning fire with the calm efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. Through the gap beneath the overturned table, I watched Sora's red heels click backward toward the kitchen exit, not running from the gunfire, but walking, like she'd known exactly where to stand when the bullets started flying. I pressed my face against the cold marble floor, hands over my head, and thought about my brother's face, when I'd promised him I'd be home for breakfast. That promise was looking more impossible by the second. The gunfire was louder than I'd expected, not like the movies, but raw and percussive, each shot punching holes in the air and my sense of reality. Glass shattered somewhere behind me. Someone screamed. The sommelier, who'd been so condescending about my wine knowledge earlier, lay motionless near the bar, his white shirt blooming red like a grotesque flower. I should have run. Every survival instinct I had screamed at me to move, but my body had other ideas. My legs locked, muscles turned to stone, as my brain tried to process that this was actually happening, that I was actually going to die in a restaurant I couldn't even afford to eat in. Move. Minseek's voice cut through the chaos, but I couldn't. My hands were pressed against the marble floor, frozen, useless. He didn't ask again. His arm locked around my waist like a steel band, hauling me up and forward as bullets chewed through the overturned table behind us. He moved like violence was a language he spoke fluently, smooth, economical, his gun barking twice as we crossed the dining room. 2 shooters dropped. The third ducked behind a column, and Minseek used those 3 seconds to drag me toward the kitchen doors. We crashed through into fluorescent brightness and steam. The kitchen staff had already scattered, pots still boiling on empty stoves, knives abandoned on cutting boards. Chef Lawrence's signature dessert, the one that cost $200, sat perfectly plated and forgotten, its gold leaf garnish catching the light like a monument to a world that had just ended. Minseek's grip on my wrist was bruising as he pulled me past the line, past the walk-in freezers, toward the service exit. Behind us, the kitchen doors exploded inward. More gunfire. The stainless steel prep station next to my head erupted in sparks. The car, Minsik said, his voice deadly calm despite the chaos. Black Mercedes. You run. You don't look back. He kicked open the service exit, and suddenly we were in the alley, winter air hitting my face like a slap. The Mercedes sat 30 feet away, engine already running, which meant someone had been waiting, watching, ready to extract him the moment things went wrong. I wondered briefly if that someone knew I'd be with him. We sprinted. My dress shoes, designed for serving expensive wine not running for my life, slipped on ice. Minsik's hand tightened, keeping me upright. 20 feet. 15. The service exit behind us burst open again. Bullets sparked off the Mercedes' trunk. Minsik returned fire without breaking stride, his aim impossibly accurate for someone moving at a dead run. 10 feet. The driver's door of a white van across the alley cracked open, and I caught a glimpse of someone inside raising what looked like a rifle with a scope. Minsik saw it too. Down. He tackled me behind the Mercedes just as the alley erupted in crossfire. His body covered mine again, and I felt him flinch, once, sharply, before he shoved me toward the back door. Inside.
Now.
I scrambled in. He followed, blood seeping through his jacket sleeve, and slammed the door as the driver punched the accelerator. The Mercedes lurched forward, bulletproof windows spiderwebbing as we careened out of the alley into traffic. Through the rear window, I watched the Azure Dragon recede into the distance, police lights already converging like sharks to blood. Minsik pressed a hand to his arm, his jaw tight with pain, and turned those dark eyes on me. Start talking, he said quietly. And if I don't like what I hear, you're going back out that door. The penthouse was exactly what I'd expected and nothing like I'd imagined. All floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a city that looked deceptively peaceful from 40 stories up, modern furniture that probably cost more than my yearly salary, and the kind of silence that money bought when it wanted to pretend violence didn't exist. Minsik's men swept through first, checking corners and closets with military precision while he stood in the foyer, still pressing that blood-soaked handkerchief to his arm. The wound looked worse in the light, a clean graze, but deep enough to need stitches. He clearly wasn't planning to get at a hospital. I need to go home, I said, my voice shakier than I wanted. My brother. He's sick. He needs me. I have to. Your phone. Minsik's hand extended, palm up, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. What? No, I need to call him. I need to tell him I'm okay. Your phone, he repeated, and something in his eyes made me realize this wasn't a request. This was the moment I stopped being the woman who'd saved his life and became the woman who knew too much. My hand trembled as I pulled it from my apron pocket, the apron I was still wearing, still splattered with someone else's champagne and my own fear. He took it without touching my fingers, like even that small contact might contaminate whatever calculation he was running. He turned it over once, then handed it to one of his men, who disappeared down a hallway with it like evidence being logged at a crime scene. I'm not part of this, I said, hating how desperate I sounded. I just heard something. I tried to help, that's all. You speak Korean. It wasn't a question. His eyes were flat, assessing, the same look he'd probably given Sora right before testing her pulse. Fluently enough to understand a phone conversation through a bathroom door. That's convenient. I grew up in Koreatown. I worked at the Dragon for 3 years. You're a waitress who just happened to overhear an assassination plot, just happened to understand every word, just happened to be brave enough, or stupid enough, to warn me. He stepped closer, and I caught the scent of gunpowder and expensive cologne mixed with blood. Or, you're exactly where someone wanted you to be. The accusation hit like a physical blow. You think I'm working with them? I think I don't know you. His voice was cold, clinical. I think the woman I trusted just tried to have me killed, so my judgment is clearly impaired. I think until I figure out which side you're really on, you're not going anywhere. He nodded to one of his men, the one built like a concrete wall, with eyes like a reptile.
Guest suite.
East wing. Lock it from the outside. Wait. You can't just. I can. Minseek turned away, pressing a button that made part of the wall slide open to reveal a full medical kit. And I am. If you're telling the truth, you'll be home by morning. If you're not. He pulled out surgical thread, his movements practiced despite the blood loss.
Well,
We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. The guard's hand clamped around my arm, not brutal, but immovable. As he dragged me toward the east wing, I caught one last glimpse of Minseek in the reflection of those massive windows and realized he was watching me go with the same expression he'd worn reading my note, like he was trying to decide if I was his salvation or his next mistake. The guest suite was nicer than any room I'd ever slept in, king-sized bed with sheets that probably had a thread count higher than my credit score, an en-suite bathroom with marble everything, and a view of the city that would have been breathtaking if I wasn't a prisoner. I'd tried the door exactly once. Locked, as promised. The windows didn't open. My phone was gone. For all my brother knew, I'd vanished into the same void that swallowed people who got too close to men like Minseek Park. I'd been pacing for maybe 2 hours when I heard the lock click. Minseek stood in the doorway, his wounded arm now properly bandaged, wearing a fresh black shirt that somehow made him look more dangerous than the blood-soaked one had. In his hand was a manila folder, the kind that held either salvation or damnation, never anything in between. Amara Johnson, he said, reading from the folder like he was reciting my autopsy report. 26. Raised in Koreatown after your parents died in a car accident when you were 12. Worked 3 jobs through community college. Currently employed at the Azure Dragon for 3 years. Exemplary service record. No criminal history. He looked up. And a brother. Isaiah. Age 14. Dilated cardiomyopathy requiring immediate transplant. My blood went cold. How did you? I own people who own people. He stepped inside, and I heard the door lock click behind him, which meant we were alone, and no one was coming if I screamed. St. Catherine's Medical Center, Cardiac Intensive Care Unit, 5th floor. He's been on the transplant list for 8 months. The surgery costs $400,000. Your insurance covers $60,000. You've been working every shift available trying to close that gap, which is why you picked up extra VIP section hours, even though the clientele makes you uncomfortable. Each word felt like a scalpel, cutting away any illusion of privacy I'd had left. What do you want? My voice came out steadier than I felt. The truth. He set the folder on the dresser, and I caught a glimpse of Isaiah's medical records, somehow obtained in the 2 hours I'd been locked in here. Starting with why a woman desperate enough to work herself to death for her brother would risk everything to save a stranger. Because letting someone die when I could stop it would make me just like you. Something flickered in his eyes, amusement, maybe, or recognition. Careful. You don't know what I'm like yet. I know you're holding me hostage. I'm keeping you alive. He moved to the window, his reflection ghosting over the city lights. Sora knows you warned me. By now, she's told her new partners about the helpful waitress who ruined their plan. You think you can just go home? Back to your apartment in Koreatown? Visit your brother at St. Catherine's like nothing happened. The implications settled over me like ice water. I hadn't just saved him. I'd painted a target on my own back. As of 2 hours ago, Minseek continued, his voice conversational, clinical, I purchased St. Catherine's cardiac wing. All of it. The equipment, the staff contracts, the transplant coordination. Your brother's care is now under my direct control. I felt the walls close in. You can't. I already did. He turned to face me, and I saw the calculation in his eyes, the same cold assessment he'd probably used 1,000 times before. Here's how this works. You stay here under my protection until I've dealt with the people trying to kill me. You tell me everything you heard, everything you saw, every detail that might keep me alive. You do exactly what I say when I say it. And if I refuse? His expression didn't change, but somehow the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Then Isaiah's machines turn off, and you get to explain to him why his sister valued her principles more than his heartbeat. The hatred that surged through me was so pure, it almost felt clean. This was power, raw, ugly, the kind that didn't pretend to be anything but what it was. This was a man who'd taken every vulnerability I had and weaponized it in under 2 hours. I could have let you die, I whispered. But you didn't. Something that might have been respect crossed his face. Which means you're either very good or very foolish. Either way, he moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the handle. You belong to me now. Until this war is over, your life, your brother's life, all of it exists because I allow it to. The lock clicked behind him, and I was alone again with the city lights and the crushing weight of a choice that was never really a choice at all. Through the door, I heard him giving orders to someone, something about doubling security on St. Catherine's 5th floor. Even my brother's hospital room had become part of his fortress now. Morning came through floor-to-ceiling windows that turned the sunrise into an interrogation, too bright, too exposing, impossible to hide from. I'd spent the night on top of the covers, still in my wine-stained uniform, alternating between rage and terror while imagining 1,000 ways to kill Minseek Park with the decorative letter opener on the dresser. The lock clicked at 7 sharp. He entered with coffee and a tablet, looking infuriatingly well-rested for someone who'd been shot at 12 hours ago. You said you overheard a phone call. I need everything. Names, times, exact phrases. And if I don't remember? I stayed on the bed, arms crossed, clinging to whatever defiance I had left. Then you're useless to me. He set the coffee on the nightstand, close enough to be civil, far enough to not be kind. And I don't keep useless things. The threat hung in the air between us, as subtle as a noose. I took the coffee. It was perfect, cream, no sugar, exactly how I took it. Which meant he'd been watching me at the restaurant long before I'd saved his life, cataloging details the way predators memorize prey. She called someone Taehyung, I said finally. Used it twice. Once as a greeting, once when she was giving the final confirmation. I closed my eyes, pulling the memory forward through the haze of adrenaline and fear. She said the hit had to happen before the engagement party announcement. That timing was critical because the Seoul branch needed plausible deniability when the transition happened. Minseek's expression shifted, the first crack in that marble facade. Seoul branch. She said those exact words.
Yes.
And she mentioned the warehouse district near the old ports. Something about moving the shipment routes thereafter. I paused, watching his jaw tighten. After you were gone. He set down the tablet, his fingers drumming that same patient rhythm I'd seen at the restaurant. But now I recognized it for what it was, the visible edge of a mind processing threats, calculating responses, planning violence with the precision of a chess master. Taehyung is my cousin, he said quietly. Second son of the Park family's sole operations. He's been bitter about succession for years, but I didn't think he'd. He stopped, something almost vulnerable crossing his face before the mask slammed back into place. You didn't think family would betray you. His eyes snapped to mine, sharp enough to cut. Don't presume to understand my family. I understand betrayal. I stood, closing the distance between us, because fear had stopped being useful somewhere around 4 in the morning. I understand being underestimated. And I understand that you need me more than you want to admit, or you wouldn't be here asking questions instead of making threats. For a long moment, he just looked at me, really looked like I'd suddenly become 3-dimensional instead of a problem to solve. The Shanghai account, he said finally. Did she mention it? I rifled through the memory. She said something about the Chin family honoring the new arrangement. That they'd already transferred the first deposit. Christ. He turned away, running a hand through his hair, the first uncontrolled gesture I'd seen from him. It's not just a coup. It's a complete restructuring. They've been planning this for months. Then you need every detail I can give you. I moved to the window, watching the city wake up below us, all those normal people living normal lives. Every name, every location, every piece of leverage I heard her mention. Why? He was behind me suddenly, close enough that I could feel his presence like heat. You hate me. You made that clear. So why help me win? Because my brother doesn't get to die for your cousin's ambition. I turned, meeting those dark eyes that had stopped being quite so cold. And because whatever you are, Sora, is worse. She smiled at you while signing your death warrant. At least you're honest about being a monster. Something that might have been a laugh escaped him. Bitter, brief, almost human. Most people try harder to flatter me. Most people aren't your prisoner. No, he agreed. They're not. The silence that followed felt different somehow, less hostile, more complicated, like we'd both just acknowledged a truth neither of us wanted to examine too closely. Come with me, he said, heading for the door. If you're going to survive what's coming, you need to learn how to shoot. As I followed him down the hallway, I caught his reflection in the polished marble, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. It looked almost like respect. 3 days of training had left my hands blistered and my muscles aching in places I didn't know existed, but I could now field strip a Glock 19 in under a minute and hit a target at 20 yards. Minseek was a brutal teacher, precise, demanding, and infuriatingly patient when I wanted him to just give me a reason to hate him purely instead of this complicated thing that had started growing between gunshots and shared meals eaten in silence. Now he stood in the doorway of my golden cage holding a garment bag, his expression unreadable. The engagement party is tonight, he said, laying the bag across the bed. Sora's turned it into a memorial service. Very touching. Apparently, I died, heroically defending her during a random robbery gone wrong. How convenient. I unzipped the bag and froze. The dress inside was the color of fresh blood, the same shade Sora had worn the night she'd tried to have him killed. The symbolism was so brutal it was almost elegant. Put it on. He turned away, giving me privacy I wasn't sure I wanted anymore. There's a wire sewn into the bodice. Audio only, no video. And a thigh holster fitted for the compact we've been training with. My hand shook as I pulled off my borrowed clothes, expensive loungewear that had become my uniform in this strange purgatory between captivity and something I didn't have words for yet. The dress slid over my skin like water, fitting perfectly in a way that made me wonder how long he'd been planning this. How did you know my measurements? I asked, my voice muffled by fabric. I know everything about you, Amara. His reflection appeared in the window glass, watching me without watching. Your dress size, your shoe size, the way you hold your breath when you're concentrating on a shot. The fact that you touch your brother's hospital bracelet, the one you keep in your pocket every time you're scared. I'd forgotten I still had Isaiah's old bracelet, the one from his first surgery. The fact that Minseek had noticed felt like both an invasion and an intimacy I wasn't ready to acknowledge. The dress zipped up the side, hugging curves I usually hid under shapeless uniforms. When I turned, Minseek's expression did something complicated, a flash of appreciation quickly buried under calculation. The wire activates when you press here. He stepped closer, his fingers brushing the hidden button near my ribs, and I felt the touch everywhere. The gun goes here. His hand skimmed my thigh, fastening the holster with professional efficiency that somehow felt anything but professional. The safety's off. You point, you shoot, you don't hesitate. I've never shot at a person before. You'll tonight. His hands rested on my shoulders, turning me to face the mirror. We stood there together, him in his black suit, me in that blood-red dress, looking like violence disguised as wealth. Sora will have security everywhere. Taehyung will be there, probably giving some speech about honoring my memory while planning how to spend my money. Everyone who wanted me dead will be in one room, celebrating. Sounds like a trap. It is. His smile in the mirror was all edges. For them. He produced a jewelry box, diamonds that probably cost more than Isaiah's surgery, cold and glittering against black velvet. Tonight, you're not a waitress who got caught in the crossfire. You're not a prisoner in my penthouse. His fingers fastened the necklace at my throat, each touch deliberate. Tonight, you are the woman who saved the king. You walk in on my arm, you smile at the people who want us dead, and you help me burn their world down. And if something goes wrong, His hands tightened on my shoulders, just slightly. Then you run. There's an exit route mapped on your phone. The one I'm giving back to you. You get out, you get to Isaiah, and you disappear. Without you. If necessary. Something flickered in his eyes. The closest he'd come to admitting I'd become more than just a useful asset. But I'd rather we both survived.
Why?
I turned to face him, close enough to see the faint scar along his jaw, close enough to smell his cologne and see the exhaustion he hid so well. Why does it matter if I make it out? He looked at me for a long moment, his expression unguarded for once. Because you're the first person in years who saved me without wanting something in return. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He checked it, and his face hardened back into the mask I'd grown used to. The cars are ready. We leave in 20 minutes. He headed for the door, pausing at the threshold. And Amara? Whatever happens tonight, his voice carried a weight I couldn't quite decipher. Stay close to me. As the door closed behind him, I caught my reflection, a woman in a blood-red dress, armed and dangerous, about to walk into a room full of people who'd killed her the moment they realized she was still breathing. I touched Isaiah's bracelet in my pocket one last time and wondered which version of myself would walk back out. The grand chrysanthemum ballroom dripped with the kind of opulence that made the azure dragon look modest, crystal chandeliers the size of cars, ice sculptures of weeping angels, and enough white roses to bury a body in. Which, given the occasion, felt grimly appropriate. Minseek's hand rested on the small of my back as we stood at the entrance, his touch steady while my heart tried to punch through my ribs. Below us, Seoul's elite mingled in designer black, their faces artfully arranged in expressions of grief for a man they'd probably feared more than mourned. Ready, he murmured against my ear, his breath warm.
No.
Good. Neither am I. His fingers tightened briefly. That makes us honest. We descended the stairs together, and I watched the ripple effect spread through the crowd, heads turning, conversations stopping mid-sentence, champagne glasses freezing halfway to lips. The shock moved like a wave, crashing finally against the dais where Sora stood in widow's black, her face draining of color so fast I thought she might actually faint. But she didn't. Instead, something flickered across her features, rage, fear, calculation, before the mask of grief transformed into surprised joy so perfect it would have fooled anyone who hadn't heard her order his death. Minseek. She flew down from the dais, arms outstretched, playing the relieved Fiancée flawlessly. Oh my God, I thought. The police said you were missing, I thought. I'm sure you did. His voice was warm honey, laced with arsenic. He caught her hands before she could embrace him, holding her at arm's length like she was something that might bite. I had some business to attend to. You understand. Her eyes slid to me, and I felt the weight of her assessment, taking in the blood-red dress that matched the one she'd worn that night, the diamonds at my throat, the way Minseek's hand never left my waist. And who is this? The question sounded casual, but her jaw was so tight I could see the muscle jump. This is Amara. Minseek pulled me closer, the gesture possessive enough to make several people nearby exchange glances. She's been invaluable to me these past few days. The implication hung in the air like smoke. I watched Sora's perfect composure crack at the edges, jealousy bleeding through the grief, like ink through water. How lovely. Her smile could have cut glass. Though perhaps a memorial service isn't the most appropriate place for introductions. On the contrary, Minseek's voice carried just far enough for nearby guests to hear. I can't think of a better place to celebrate being alive. He guided me into the crowd, leaving Sora standing alone in her widow's weeds while whispers erupted around us. I caught a glimpse of a tall man near the bar, sharp suit, family resemblance in the jaw, eyes tracking Minseek with barely concealed fury. Taehyung, Minseek murmured, following my gaze. Don't stare. He looks like he wants to finish what Sora started.
He does.
His hand slid from my waist, fingers lacing through mine. Which is why we need to move fast. The server room is behind the kitchen, service hallway, Third door on the left. Security changes shift in 8 minutes. My heart kicked into overdrive. That's not much time. It's enough. I'll create a distraction. You plant the device, you get out, you find me by the south terrace. He stopped, turning to face me fully, and I saw something dangerous in his eyes. If anything goes wrong, if you feel unsafe for even a second, you run. Understood? Before I could answer, a waiter appeared with champagne. Minseek took 2 glasses, handed me one, and raised his own in a toast loud enough to draw attention. To survival, he announced, his voice carrying across the ballroom. And to knowing your enemies. The room went silent. I watched Sora's face twist with barely suppressed rage, watched Taehyung's hand drift toward his jacket in a gesture that looked casual until you noticed the bulge underneath. Minseek drained his glass, set it down, and turned to one of the security guards near the dais, a mountain of a man with dead eyes and an earpiece. I need to speak with your supervisor.
Now.
There's been a security breach. As the guard's attention locked onto Minseek, his body language shifting to defensive, I felt the moment crystallize. This was it. The point of no return. I slipped away into the crowd, moving toward the kitchen entrance, every step measured and careful. Behind me, I heard Minseek's voice rising, demanding answers, drawing every eye in the room. The service hallway was empty, fluorescent lit, smelling of catering and fear. Third door on the left. My hand trembled as I pulled the device from my clutch, smaller than a thumb drive, powerful enough to bring down an empire. The server room door was unlocked. Too easy. Minseek's voice echoed in my head. If you feel unsafe for even a second. I pushed the door open and froze. Someone was already inside, their back to me, hands flying across a keyboard with the efficiency of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. They turned, and my blood turned to ice. It was one of Minseek's own guards, the one who'd driven us away from the Azure Dragon, who'd been in the penthouse every day, who we'd trusted completely. His hand moved toward his weapon as recognition flashed in his eyes, and I realized with sickening clarity that Sora's betrayal hadn't been the only one. 3 years of training kicked in before thought did. My hand found the compact at my thigh, clearing the holster as the guard's weapon rose. We fired simultaneously, his bullet sparking off the server rack inches from my head, mine catching him center mass. He dropped, clutching his chest, gasping through what I realized with detached horror was a bulletproof vest. Not dead. Not even close. I lunged for the server, fingers shaking as I jammed the device into the USB port. The screen flickered, uploading 10%, 15%, while behind me the guard groaned, reaching for his weapon again. Don't. My gun trained on his head this time. No vest to save him there. Don't make me. His hand froze. Behind his eyes, I saw the same calculation I'd learned from Minseek, weighing survival against loyalty, deciding which was worth more. The upload hit 100%. The device blinked green. I ran. The service hallway blurred past, my heels clicking against tile as I burst back into the ballroom just as every speaker in the venue crackled to life. The ambient music died. For one perfect moment, the entire room held its breath. Then Sora's voice filled the space, crystal clear and damning. He dies before the check comes. Make it clean.
No witnesses.
The ballroom erupted into chaos. Sora's face went from pale to bloodless, her mouth opening in denial that no one could hear over her own recorded words. After, the Park Syndicate becomes ours. No more playing second to a man who still treats me like a prize. I watched Minseek across the room, his expression carved from ice as he turned to face Sora. Their eyes met, and even from 20 feet away, I could see the moment she realized everything was over. Taehyung moved first, his hand disappearing into his jacket. But Minseek's security, the ones still loyal, were faster. Gunfire cracked through the ballroom. Guests screamed, diving for cover behind ice sculptures and overturned tables. Crystal shattered, raining down like deadly snow. Through the chaos, I saw Sora running. Not toward the exits, but toward me. Her face twisted with a rage so pure it looked almost cleansing. You. The word was venom. She had a gun, small, silver, probably pulled from a hidden holster in that morning dress. You're just the help. You're nothing. You don't get to destroy me. The barrel aimed at my chest, and I saw her finger tighten on the trigger. But I'd spent 3 days learning from the best. I moved left as she fired, the bullet passing through the space I'd occupied a heartbeat before. Her eyes widened, surprised that the waitress could move like that, and I used that second of shock to close the distance. My hand caught her wrist, twisting the way Mincy had taught me, feeling the small bones grind. The gun clattered to the marble floor. She screamed, swinging wild with her free hand, nails raking across my cheek. Pain bloomed, hot and sharp, but I'd learned to work through pain. I pivoted, using her momentum against her, and drove my elbow into her solar plexus. The air left her lungs in a whoosh. I'm not just help, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline singing through my veins. Not anymore. She collapsed to her knees, gasping, tears of rage streaming down her perfect face. Around us, the gunfire was dying down. Minsik's men gaining control, Taehyung's people either dead or surrendering. I picked up her gun, ejected the magazine, and tossed both pieces in opposite directions. Minsik appeared through the smoke and chaos, blood on his sleeve but alive, his eyes finding mine immediately. The relief that crossed his face was so raw it almost hurt to witness. You good? He asked, taking in the scratch on my face, the way I was breathing hard. I'm good. I looked down at Sora, still gasping on the floor. She's contained. He crouched next to his former fiancée, his expression devoid of anything resembling mercy. You should have killed me yourself, Sora. Outsourcing was always your weakness. She spat at him, literally, and he didn't even flinch. Take her, he told his men. The authorities can have what's left when I'm done questioning her. As they hauled Sora away, still screaming obscenities, Minsik's hand found mine. His thumb brushed across my knuckles, once, twice, a gesture so gentle it seemed impossible from a man who'd just orchestrated a massacre. Across the ballroom, I caught movement near the service entrance, the guard from the server room, limping away through the chaos, melting into the shadows like he'd never been there at all. I opened my mouth to tell Minsik, but something made me hesitate. Some instinct I couldn't name yet, whispering that not every betrayal should be revealed in the moment it's discovered. The penthouse felt different in the aftermath, quieter somehow, despite the armed guard stationed at every entrance and the encrypted phones ringing constantly with damage control. Bodies had been counted, allies had been secured, and the Park Syndicate had emerged from the coup attempt bloodied, but unbroken. Minsik stood at the windows overlooking the city, his reflection ghosting over the sunrise like a specter. He didn't turn when I entered, but I saw his shoulders shift, acknowledgement without words. It's done, he said quietly. Taehyung is on a plane to Seoul with a very clear message about what happens to family who forget their place. Sora's assets are frozen, her contacts exposed. The syndicate is secure. And me. I stayed by the door, suddenly uncertain of my place in this new world we'd carved out of violence and necessity. He turned then, and in his hand was an envelope, thick, expensive paper that probably contained my freedom. $400,000. Enough to cover Isaiah's surgery, your debts, and a new start anywhere you want. He set it on the table between us like a chess piece. There's also a plane ticket. First class to anywhere in the world. New identity, clean passport, my personal guarantee that no one will ever connect you to what happened. My throat tightened. That's generous. It's payment. His voice was careful, controlled. For saving my life. For risking your own. For proving yourself more loyal than people I've known for years. I picked up the envelope, feeling the weight of escape in my hands. Freedom. Safety. Everything I'd wanted when this nightmare started. I tore it in half. The sound of ripping paper was obscenely loud in the quiet penthouse. Minseek's eyes widened. The first time I genuinely surprised him. I don't want her payment, I said, letting the pieces flutter to the marble floor like broken promises. I want my brother's surgery. And then I want to come back. Amara. I've spent my whole life being invisible. Being the help. Being someone people look through instead of at. I moved closer, watching him tense like he wasn't sure if I was about to kiss him or kill him. Maybe I wasn't sure either. You saw me. From the beginning, even when you thought I might be your enemy, you saw me. You don't know what you're asking for. His hand lifted, hovering near my face like he wanted to touch the scratch Sora had left but didn't think he had the right. This life, it's not freedom. It's a different kind of cage. Then we'll be caged together. I caught his hand, pressing it against my cheek, feeling the calluses and scars that matched my own now. You said I belonged to you until the war was over. What if I choose to stay after? Something broke in his expression, that careful control cracking to reveal the loneliness underneath. Why? Because I'm tired of surviving. I met his eyes, seeing my own reflection in those dark depths. I want to live. I want power. I want to matter. His thumb brushed across my lips, the gesture possessive and questioning at once. You already matter. Then prove it. The kiss was inevitable, had been since the moment I'd slipped him that note, maybe. It tasted like gunpowder and expensive whiskey and the kind of hunger that came from two people who'd been alone too long finding someone who finally understood. When we broke apart, his forehead rested against mine, his breathing unsteady. Your brother's surgery is scheduled for tomorrow, he murmured. Best cardiac surgeon in the country. I've already arranged everything. I know. I'd learned to expect nothing less from him. I want to be there when he wakes up. Of course. And then I'm coming back here. He pulled back enough to look at me, searching for doubt he wouldn't find. Are you sure? Instead of answering, I walked to the bar, poured 2 fingers of his favorite whiskey into crystal glasses that probably cost more than my old apartment. I handed him one, then moved to the chair across from his. The one where I'd watched him plan wars and execute strategy. The one that had been empty except for me. I sat down, crossed my legs, and raised my glass. I'm not serving anymore, I said, my voice steady and sure. I'm ruling. Something that might have been pride flickered across his face. He raised his own glass, a smile playing at the edges of his mouth, the real kind, not the dangerous one he showed his enemies. To the new queen, he said softly. To survival, I countered. And knowing our enemies. We drank, and through the windows, the city sprawled below us, full of people who would learn soon enough that the Park Syndicate had a new name to fear, a new player in the game. But as Minseek's eyes met mine over the rim of his glass, I caught something that made my breath catch, a flicker of calculation, a question I couldn't quite read. In his other hand, half hidden by the chair's armrest, his phone screen glowed with a message I could just barely see. The girl is more dangerous than you think.
She.
He noticed me looking and turned the phone face down, his smile never wavering. Tomorrow, he said, we begin your real education. And I smiled back, wondering which of us was playing the longer game.